The story fell flat in front of the whole valley, and everyone who'd built it had seen it coming days before.
By the end of this, you'll know exactly why nobody said anything, and what a room of professional storytellers on the other side of the world learned from almost the same silence. Days earlier, Milo, Kai, and Noah had been building a story diorama for the Valley's festival, a small clay world telling one whole story, start to finish. Milo designed the arc himself before anyone touched the clay. That's his strategic mind. He needed to see the whole shape of the story before he could trust a single scene of it. Kai built the middle scene exactly as drawn, even though something about it nagged at him. It's fine, he told himself. Keep moving. That's his activator drive, fighting his own better judgment. Noah noticed the scene didn't quite land either. She said nothing. She didn't want to be the one who slowed everyone down. Even her empathy, tuned to exactly this kind of tension, stayed quiet. At the festival, the scene fell exactly as flat as Kai had feared. Milo watched the crowd's polite, confused silence. Noah watched Milo. Nobody had said a word, and now everyone in the valley could see why somebody should have. It isn't the first time a team quietly sensed something was wrong and said nothing. In 1998, an animation studio watched something disappear in real time. Not a scene, but almost an entire movie. A single mistyped command started deleting the production files for Toy Story 2. Characters vanished from the system. Woody's hat, his boots, then Woody himself. About 90% of the film gone. And the backup built for exactly this moment had been silently failing for weeks. The film survived because of one person, Galen Sussman, the supervising technical director, home on leave with a new baby and syncing a working copy to her own computer so she could keep working. She and a colleague drove it back to the studio that night, wrapped in blankets on the back seat. The movie was saved, but the near loss wasn't really a backup problem. It was a sign of something the team had been quietly living with. In 1999, in the direct aftermath, Pixar founded a standing group called the Braintrust. Feedback targets the work, never the person, and hierarchy pauses at the door. No head of the table, no org chart in the room, just people who'd actually made films saying plainly what wasn't working yet, because everyone had agreed in advance that the story, not each other's feelings, was what they were there to protect. It wasn't just the process. It was who was in the room from the start. Steve Jobs, the investor, who deliberately stayed out of creative meetings. Ed Catmull, the careful engineer. John Lasseter, the emotional, story-first animator. 3 very different people, each knowing exactly where they weren't the expert.
Give a mediocre idea to a great team, and they'll fix it, or make something better.
It still shows up in every film. In an early Braintrust session for Inside Out, the character's sadness was heading toward being the story's villain, the emotion getting in Joy's way. The room's honest pushback helped the director see sadness wasn't a flaw to defeat. She was the one the story actually needed. Candor isn't only about catching what's broken. Sometimes it's catching what's too good. While making Finding Nemo, Pixar's engineers built water so realistic, test audiences mistook it for real footage. Director Andrew Stanton called it out anyway. It clashed with a stylized fish, so the team deliberately dialed the realism back down. So, is the fix just be more honest with each other? Almost. Being liked and being useful to the work turn out to be 2 different ulls, and most teams default to the first one without noticing. A researcher at Berkeley tested this directly. She split groups 3 ways: no instructions, classic brainstorming, generate freely, never criticize, and a debate condition, explicitly told to challenge each other's ideas. The debate groups generated 7 more ideas per person than the brainstorming groups. The result held up when she repeated the whole study in a second country. The old never criticize rule was meant to protect feelings. Instead, it was quietly protecting bad ideas. You may already know the other half of this. Google's own research found psychological safety was the single strongest predictor of a great team. Candor is what that actually looks like in practice, not comfort, permission to be honest. So here's the actual fix. Not more talent and not more comfort. A room where the work can be criticized without anyone being. Back at the diorama, Noah was the one who finally said it out loud. That middle scene isn't working. Can we look at it together before we show it again?
Kai admitted what he'd swallowed for days. Honestly, I never bought it either. Milo felt the old urge to defend his own design rise up and caught himself. Then let's fix the scene, he said instead, not argue about whose fault it is. For the first time, all three were talking about the diorama instead of around it.
The second showing wasn't flashier. It was just honest, scene by scene, before anyone else ever saw it. This time, the story held all the way through, not because any of them had gotten more talented overnight, but because one of them had finally said the quiet thing out loud.
That's the real lesson behind a studio that almost lost a movie to silence and saved decades of films with a room built to end it. Talent finds the story. Candor is what actually finishes it.
You don't need a formal Braintrust to start. Before your next review, agree out loud that feedback targets the work, never the person. Give everyone a real turn to speak, regardless of title, and close by asking one honest question. What's the one thing here that isn't working yet? Say it in the room before someone outside it has to say it for you.
If you want to see whether your own team has that kind of room yet, take the free team check at strengthhack.com/safeteams.